planes, two of the most ambitious machines ever built. Between them, they carried more people across more oceans than anything else in aviation history, and both are gone now. At their peak, you couldn't miss them. The Boeing 747 with its signature hump, that second deck sitting behind the cockpit like a crown. The Airbus A380, wider than a boulevard, two full passenger decks stacked on top of each other, a flying apartment building. Both four engines, both enormous, both built around the same idea, that the future of aviation was bigger. They weren't just planes, they were statements. The 747 had a first-class lounge upstairs where passengers sat in armchairs and drank cocktails somewhere over the Atlantic. The Airbus A380 had shower spas at 40,000 feet and a bar in the back where passengers stood around drinking champagne at 600 miles per hour. Airlines used them as billboards. If you flew one, you were serious. If you didn't, you were falling behind. And then, quietly, they both stopped being built. The last A380 was delivered on December 16, 2021. The last 747 on January 31, 2023. The era of the jumbo jet lasted just over 50 years and ended not with a crash or a scandal, but with something far more mundane. To understand what happened, you have to go back in time. In 1966, Pan Am signed a $525 million order for 25 aircraft, the largest commercial aviation deal in history at that point. Boeing had just 28 months to design a plane that had never existed. They bet the company, literally. The debt exceeded $2 billion, a record for any corporation on Earth at the time. Executives later admitted it was probably too large a project for them, but they built it anyway. On February 9, 1969, the 747 flew for the first time from Everett, Washington. The fuselage was longer than the Wright brothers' entire first flight. The tail stood 6 stories tall. The factory built to house it was and still is the largest building by volume on the planet. On January 22, 1970, Pan Am flew 335 passengers from JFK to London Heathrow. 26 airlines had already placed orders, terrified of being left behind. The jumbo jet era had begun. For 3 decades, the 747 was untouchable. It worked because of a rule that no longer exists. In 1970, twin-engine aircraft had to stay within 60 minutes of an airport at all times. Over the Pacific, that's impossible. 4 engines meant you could lose one and still have 3. The 747 could go anywhere. No twin-engine jet could legally follow. And because it carried so many more passengers per flight, costs per seat fell dramatically. International travel, once reserved for the wealthy, opened up to the middle class. The 747 didn't just change aviation, it changed who got to see the world. At its peak in 1990, Boeing was delivering 70 of them a year. Over its lifetime, 1,574 were built, but 4 engines come with a price. The 747-400 burns around 3,240 gallons of fuel every single hour, roughly 1 gallon every second. That works out to somewhere between $24,000 and $27,000 per hour just to keep it in the air. And that cost was always there, whether the plane was full or half empty. Because the 747 had a brutal economic flaw buried in its design. A plane at only 70% capacity still burned more than 95% of the fuel of a completely full one. Fill every seat and the economics worked. Leave 100 seats empty and the airline was bleeding money at 35,000 feet. Airlines managed it for decades because no alternative existed. Then one did. By the early 2000s, the world's busiest airports were choking. Heathrow, Narita, JFK, no more runway slots, no space to add extra flights. Airbus looked at this problem and came up with what seemed like the obvious answer. Don't add more flights, add more seats per flight. So they spent $25 billion developing the A380, 2 full passenger decks, up to 850 seats, 80 meters of wingspan, an aircraft so wide that airports had to reinforce taxiways and rebuild gates just to handle it. It first flew in April 2005, entered service in 2007, and Airbus projected they'd sell 1,200 of them over 20 years. But they sold only 251. The problem wasn't the plane itself. Passengers who flew it loved it. The space, the quiet, the sense of scale. The problem was the fuel bill hiding inside every single route. The A380 costs between $26,000 and $29,000 per hour to operate, burning roughly $17,000 in fuel alone every 60 minutes. On a single Qantas flight from Sydney to Los Angeles, 14 hours in the air, the fuel bill came to $244,000 for one flight. The same route flown on a Boeing 777-300ER burned $140,000 in fuel. That's $100,000 less per flight every day. Multiply that across a fleet operating dozens of routes across a year, and the number becomes existential. And the deeper problem was that Airbus had bet on the wrong future entirely. They designed the A380 for a hub-and-spoke world, where passengers funneled through massive airports onto massive planes. But while they were building it, airlines were quietly discovering the opposite. Passengers would pay a premium for a direct flight from a smaller city, Portland to Amsterdam, Austin to London, and Nashville to Tokyo. You don't need 850 seats for that. You need 250, and you need to fly them profitably on a route that an A380 would never fill. Boeing saw this shift coming. Instead of building bigger, they built smarter. The 787 Dreamliner. Twin engines, composite fuselage, 20% more fuel efficient than the jets it replaced. Small enough to make thinner routes profitable, opening city pairs that had never had direct connections before. Over 1,500 orders followed. The A380 received no new orders after 2015. In February 2019, Emirates, which had bought 123 A380s, nearly half of every one ever built, canceled its remaining 39 on order. That same day, Airbus CEO Tom Enders announced the end of the program. The logic was simple and brutal. You cannot keep building something nobody wants to buy at a price that doesn't cover what it costs to make.
But here's the thing. Neither plane was ultimately killed by a competitor or a strategic miscalculation. They shared one deeper executioner. While fighting with fuel, ETOPS came, extended-range twin-engine operational standards. In 1985, the FAA allowed twin-engine jets to fly up to 120 minutes from an airport. By 1988, that extended to 180 minutes, covering 95% of the Earth's surface. Suddenly, a twin-engine jet could legally cross any ocean on any route in the world. The one advantage four engines had always guaranteed, the legal right to fly the long routes, was gone overnight. And the engines themselves had transformed beyond recognition. The GE90 engines on the Boeing 777 produce 115,000 pounds of thrust each. An entire 1970s trijet, 3 engines combined, produced around 125,000 pounds total. One modern engine now generates more power than a whole previous generation of jets put together. The 777-300ER carries nearly the same number of passengers as the 747-400 and burns 15% less fuel per seat doing it, a saving of around $28,000 per flight, just in fuel. 4 engines had become dead weight, extra metal, extra maintenance cycles, extra overhaul costs. Each GE90 engine overhaul runs $13 million. 4 engines on a 747 means $52 million just to rebuild the power plant for no range or safety advantage that 2 modern engines couldn't already match. COVID finished what the economics had already decided. When travel collapsed in 2020, airlines retired their biggest, thirstiest planes first. British Airways grounded its entire 747 fleet overnight. Air France retired all 10 of its A380s. These were not emergency decisions made in panic. They were decisions airlines had been quietly preparing for years, waiting for a moment that would make them defensible. The jumbo jet didn't die because it failed, it died because it succeeded. The 747 made international travel cheap and accessible. That created demand. Demand drove competition. Competition drove efficiency, and efficiency eventually made 4 engines unnecessary. The world the jumbo jet built turned out to be a world that had no room for it.